Have you ever stopped in the middle of your day, looked around at your life and felt something strange? A quiet, unsettling feeling, like none of it actually belongs to you. The job you wake up for every morning, the goals you chase, the relationships you maintain, the opinions you hold so confidently in conversations. Have you ever wondered where all of that came from? Because here is the truth. The truth that most people spend their entire lives running from. A massive chunk of who you think you are was never really chosen by you at all. I know, that is not a comfortable idea. In fact, it is one of the most disorienting realizations a human being can stumble into, but it is also one of the most important. Because the moment you begin to question the identity you have been wearing all your life, something extraordinary happens. You start to become, perhaps for the very first time, genuinely yourself. Let us talk about how this happens. When you were born, you arrived into the world as a completely open system. No beliefs, no preferences, no sense of self. You were pure potential. And almost immediately, the world got to work on you. Your parents looked at you and began projecting their hopes onto your tiny existence, their fears, their unfinished stories. Before you could even form a sentence, you were already absorbing the emotional atmosphere of your home. You learned what was safe to feel and what was not. You learned what kinds of behavior earned love and warmth, and what kinds led to coldness or punishment. You did not do this consciously. You did it the way all children do, through survival. Psychologists call this process introjection. It is the mechanism by which we swallow the values, beliefs, and expectations of the people around us, without ever stopping to digest them, without ever asking whether they actually fit who we are. A child who grows up in a household where emotions are seen as weakness does not decide to become emotionally avoidant. It simply happens. Slowly, quietly, like water shaping rock over many years. And by the time that child becomes an adult, the avoidance feels like a personality trait, something innate, something they were born with. But they were not born with it. They learned it to survive. The British psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott spent decades studying this phenomenon, and he gave us one of the most haunting concepts in all of psychology. He called it the false self. According to Winnicott, when a child's authentic emotional needs are consistently not met, they develop a kind of protective persona, a curated version of themselves designed to secure the love and approval they desperately need. This false self is not a lie exactly. It is more like a costume that gets worn so long, it starts to feel like skin. The child becomes the good student because being good brings safety, or the funny one because humor deflects tension, or the invisible one, because being seen always led to pain. And here is what makes this so quietly devastating. This process does not end in childhood. It continues through adolescence, through young adulthood, through middle age and beyond. Every social environment you enter gives you a new script to follow. School teaches you what kind of intelligence is valuable and what kind is invisible. Your friend group shows you what is cool, what is acceptable, who you need to be to belong. Social media hands you a curated gallery of aspirational identities and whispers to you constantly that you should be more like this person, more like that one. And because belonging is one of the deepest human needs, you adapt, you adjust, you perform. Carl Jung, one of the great explorers of the human psyche, had a word for this. He called it the persona. Borrowed from ancient Greek theater where actors wore literal masks to play different characters, Jung understood that having a persona is not inherently a problem. We all need ways to move through different social contexts. The problem arises when we forget we are wearing the mask. When the persona becomes so fused with our sense of self that we can no longer find the actual person underneath it. And the signs that this has happened are subtle. Subtle enough that most people miss them entirely. You feel a persistent, low-grade dissatisfaction with your life, even though on paper everything looks fine. You achieve the goals you set out to achieve and feel nothing. Or worse, you feel a creeping dread, a sense of, now what? You find it almost impossible to know what you actually want, when no one is watching, when there is no audience to perform for. Your sense of self-worth is entirely dependent on external validation, on likes, compliments, approval, achievement. You feel deeply uncomfortable with silence, because in the quiet, the questions start to rise. You say you are fine, constantly, automatically, without ever checking in with yourself to see if that is actually true. These are not character flaws. They are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signs that you have been doing what every human being does, building a self out of the materials your environment provided, without yet stepping back to evaluate whether those materials were ever truly yours. So, what does reclaiming your authentic self actually look like? In practical lived terms? The first step is simply developing the capacity to observe yourself. Not judge, not fix. Just observe. To become curious about your own automatic reactions, your reflexive opinions, your gut-level discomforts, because most of us live almost entirely on autopilot. We react before we reflect, we feel, and immediately perform the sanctioned response to that feeling. Existential psychologists call this living in bad faith. Borrowing Sartre's phrase, it means choosing the comfort of the pre-written script over the terrifying freedom of genuine choice. The second step is learning to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, because when you start peeling back the layers of who you were told to be, there is inevitably a period of profound uncertainty. You let go of the identity your parents gave you, and you do not yet have a replacement. You stop performing the version of yourself your social circle expects, and you do not know who shows up in its place. This is the space that most people cannot tolerate, so they rush back to the comfort of the old persona. But this in-between place, this no man's land of identity, is actually where the most important work happens. Jung called it individuation, the slow, often painful journey of becoming a whole and unique self. He believed it was the central task of the second half of life, though many people begin it much earlier. The third step, and perhaps the most quietly radical one, is starting to notice when you are performing versus when you are being. There is a qualitative difference in how it feels. To speak words that are genuinely yours, versus words that belong to a role you are playing. There is a particular kind of aliveness that comes with expressing something true, something vulnerable, something that has not been pre-approved by your inner critic. It is uncomfortable, and it is also unmistakable. You know it when it happens, and the more you choose it, even in small ways, the more the authentic self begins to take shape, gradually, somewhat awkwardly at first, the way all genuinely new things do. None of this means rejecting everything you have been shaped by. Your history is part of you, your experiences, your relationships, the environment that formed you. All of it has contributed something real. The goal is not to become someone unrecognizable, some radical reinvention disconnected from your past. The goal is integration. It is holding your history consciously, rather than being unconsciously controlled by it. It is choosing, with full awareness, which parts of the self you have been given you actually want to keep. Because here is the thing, some of the values instilled in you by your family, your culture, your experiences, might actually be deeply yours. They might genuinely resonate, but you cannot know that until you have examined them honestly, until you have held them up to the light and asked, are these truly mine, or are they simply old furniture I have never thought to rearrange? The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote about this. He described the difference between the aesthetic life, the life lived on the surface, seeking pleasure, avoiding discomfort, and the authentic life. The authentic life requires a kind of radical self-encounter, a willingness to face who you actually are. Beneath all the social scaffolding, Kierkegaard believed that most people never make that leap, not because they lack the capacity, but because the truth of themselves is frightening. It is easier to keep living the borrowed life, and maybe that is the heart of it. The phantom self is not a villain. It was a solution. It was the ingenious coping strategy of a child who needed to be loved and accepted in a world that had very specific conditions for that love. You should feel compassion for the self you built under those conditions. It kept you safe. It got you here. But you are not that child anymore. And the life that persona was designed to navigate is not the only life available to you. The most courageous question you can ask yourself is not who do you want to become. It is simpler than that, and much scarier. The most courageous question is this: who are you, right now, when no one is watching, when there is nothing to perform, when the audience has gone home and the lights have come down? Who is there in the quiet? That person, the one in the quiet, is the one worth meeting. And the extraordinary thing is, they have been there all along, waiting patiently beneath every mask you have ever worn, waiting for you to finally come home.